Hey everyone, welcome to week 3 of the MOOC. I'm really excited to have Malachy Browne here with us. He is a producer at the New York Times. He does amazing kind of forensic reconstruction videos and analysis. And he also previously worked at a project called Reportedly and at a company called Storeful. So he has been doing really high-level, great verification work with social information, with video footage and other things for a long time. Thank you for joining us.
Pleased to be with you, Craig. Thanks for bringing me in.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about a few things, and we're going to try and do kind of a more detailed chat about the amazing video that you and some colleagues did about the Las Vegas shooting. But to start with, as somebody who's been doing verification for a while now, one of the things that I always kind of talk to people about is like there's the tools you use, but there's also like there's the mindset that you need to have to do this work. And I'm just wondering for you, like how do you think about and how do you approach verification projects? Is there some consistent way you look at them?
Yeah, I mean, whatever the inputs, as I call them, I think of all of this in data terms, but like whatever the inputs are, the leads that you might get, it could be a tweet, it could be a sentence in an article, it could be a source just dropping you an email. What I'm thinking about, well, what are the variety of sources and ideally visual sources that gives us a unique look at this problem, the story, that might allow us to investigate it a little bit deeper, break news, or to bring something additive to an existing story. And really what we're trying to do is, I mean, it could be a scoop, but if it's an existing news story, kind of probe official accounts, ask, new questions about a certain event, and what visual evidence and open source evidence is out there that's available for us to interrogate, essentially, and try to come up with answers. That's essentially it. And it could be anything from, shipping documents to satellite imagery to fire data that NASA is collecting. That's useful for kind of monitoring scorched earth policies. OpenStreetMap data. Sometimes we will combine active fire data with OpenStreetMap data to isolate fires in populated areas, and then order satellite imagery, to see what's going on there. That's very useful for accessing remote areas, but also in Western countries and anywhere where there's proliferation of smartphones, you can gather all sorts of eyewitness cell phone footage basically and analyze that from multiple different angles. And we've run several stories, using all of those sources of information.
How do you stay up to date in terms of information sources and tools? I mean, how do you stay on top of this stuff?
By following the open source community, basically. They're really active on Twitter. I have an OS. It's called Open Source Intelligence. OSINT is what this community calls it. And people are out there, finding new tools like Strava and finding clues in activity maps that are posted in Strava in sort of far reaches of the world, which kind of arouses people's curiosity. Why are people training in the middle of the Nigerian desert, So, that community it's a kind of a community that's based on generosity. They find things, put things out there on Twitter, ask questions of each other. It's very collaborative. And just by keeping in touch with that community, following each other's work, usually that type of journalism is very explanatory and people, it's educational because people share the tools that they use. So that's one way that I do it. And then just, really by, emails and phone calls and just touching in with that sort of community of sources and collaborators that I've built up through the years, and basically what's cooking, what are you looking at, how are you doing it, that kind of thing. And at the times, I think we're lucky here because some of the technology providers and say satellite imagery providers want to work with us, and so they'll often come in and showcase some of the things that they're using or new tools or new advances that are happening out there. And and also just looking at people like investigators who spend months and months on stuff and who are at the forefront of this, like situ research and forensic architecture, and basically just studying the work that they do and how they do it.
Now, for the folks who've been doing this course, we've done this week. We've looked at what I consider to be like some of the core kind of techniques and tools and approaches to doing this kind of work. For you, when you think about the toolkit of the stuff that you would consider to be essential for people, what are some of the things that come to mind?
TweetDeck, straight off the bat, organize your lists and your searches, and just learn Twitter advanced search operators. That is really useful. We use a paid for tool called Samdesk. It's not free, so that might be used. That might not be useful to too many people. Any map, like all of the mapping websites, Google Maps, Google Earth, Bing, Yandex, there's all of those ones for geolocation, and even just sort of polygons that people mark on Wikimapia, things like that. I have my own sort of open source dashboard on start.me, and that's actually public. People can use that, and there's a whole list of tools out there that I use. But yeah, basically Twitter mapping. Learning Facebook graph search at the moment is still available.
Right.
May not be for too long.
Yeah.
More. But learning how to use that effectively is quite useful to mine data, look for sources, get in touch with people, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now you worked at Storyful, which I think was a really pioneering place when it came to gathering and verifying user-generated content. You worked at Reportedly, which was trying to do that in kind of real time and curate. And now you're at the Times. So I'm just curious, over that period of time, which is several years, what's the stuff that has changed in terms of doing this work? But I'm also curious, like, what doesn't change as well?
Yeah, I think the real-time element of it has changed because, Twitter users are so adept at finding information that, services that once were available on, Twitter, or were trying to provide information first on Twitter, that's definitely changed. I think the other big change is that, people are communicating privately more often. And so that makes the verification challenge all the greater. The first thing that you always try to verify in any piece of content or information is who's the source, and then who's the second source, who's the third source, triangulate. And with so much information being shared on closed networks, that's difficult. And so, the burden on verifying date and location and context and all of that is much greater. And so I think that finding the right people and eyewitnesses and sources to talk to, going back to traditional old journalism, is really important now. And I think that's really what we've been doing here. Is we've been combining these relatively new sources of information and technique with the reporting muscle of the New York Times and the sort of the in-country correspondents who have those networks and have that knowledge. And so we're lucky to have that. But there are others out there. There are human rights groups who have broad networks, for people who want to work with them and partner and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't we talk about the Las Vegas shooting, reconstruction and investigation that you folks did? I know you have some stuff you want to talk about. I think it's a perfect kind of pickup because you're talking about combining some of these techniques and information sources with just on the ground reporting. And there were a lot of times in that video where, when you're narrating it and you say, our reporting has confirmed this, or our reporting found that, and it's clearly not just the cell phone videos of people and whatnot. There's also other efforts you guys made. So would love to hear about that piece too.
Yeah, and the Las Vegas piece, we experimented and tried new things on that. And so in this kind of work, you're always kind of pushing your own limits and using new tools, and I'll talk about that through it. So, essentially with the Las Vegas shooting, we were a few weeks in, and we still didn't have, a lot of information from official authorities about what had happened. And in fact, the timeline for what happened had shifted several times as well. The police gave different start times. Their response was under scrutiny. They were accused of covering it up. But essentially, in the absence of a solid timeline of events, we wanted to establish that through our own. And there was loads of videos, dozens of videos. I think 45 I gathered videos of that event, and around 35 of the shooting itself. And so I gathered all of those and organized them by location. Inside the fairgrounds, outside in Las Vegas Boulevard, on Giles Street, where lots of the injured were taken, over at the Mandalay Hotel and in the surrounds of there. That's a really important thing is, try to know what questions you're answering from the outset and organize the evidence as you're gathering it, because it can become quite messy. And then as I started, listening to the videos of the shooting, I could detect patterns in those videos. So, for instance, the duration of a burst, the interval to the next burst, and several of the videos cover 3 or 4 bursts. And so I was able to start lining up and saying, maybe that's burst 4 to 6. Well, that might be bursts, 5 to 9. And so we did that then very technically. So we used Adobe Premiere, which is a video editing software, and we extracted the audio waveforms for each burst of gunfire. And each one essentially had its own fingerprint, the rate of fire, how bullets might have jammed, the number of bullets fired, and then the interval to the next one. Right. And so you can imagine matching these up and then, reconstructing the entire shooting from multiple different videos covering different parts of that shooting. And what that gave us was, a multi-location view of the shooting as it unfolded, 12 bursts of fire, and those 12 bursts kind of were the scaffolding around which we built our story. And so this is really dense material, but so you need to organize it and sort of carry people through. And then for each sort of minute of the shooting, we're able to analyze how the police responded, where they first arrived, how people in the fairground responded, and then by overlaying the police scanner audio and the medical technicians' EMT scanner audio over it, we were able to see what they were saying and how they were reporting what was happening around the fairground. And also then, because in the fairground itself where he was targeting, you could hear the bursts of fire, but over at the hotel, you could hear extra bursts of fire as well that weren't picked up on the fairground. And we were able to determine that was him firing indoors. If you remember the story, there was an engineer and a security man stuck in the hallway, and he was firing at them as well. So all of those details kind of gave us new insights into what was happening. And I can talk as well if you want, and like really fine details if you want me to go into that.
I mean, one of the things that I think as an overall approach to it sounds like, the bursts of gunfire gave you not only these fingerprints that came at certain times, but it gave you kind of a timeline to match stuff up against. And so in an event like that, it sounds like setting the timeline and figuring out where all of these videos you collected and the scanner traffic and all of those things fit on it, that seems like a really important piece of it, huh?
Exactly. It gave us down to the second when he started his attack, actually. And because we were able to establish that second, we were able to go minute by minute across what unfolded afterwards. And we were able to identify, when he was firing those single rounds, and also, through the audio analysis, we've got 3 Marines here on staff who looked at it and are aware, CJ Chivers is one of the experts on AK-47s and machine guns. And, they listened to the audio. We took, spliced down every burst from multiple different angles, and those guys listened to it, and we had a shared document, and we were asking questions of it, and what does this mean? Now, all of that didn't end up in the final product, right, but it allowed us to kind of, state one line about where he was aiming at a particular time. We did things like we took that audio that I described, and used Adobe Audition or any audio software to just stretch it right out and isolate the pings or the cracks of the bullets flying overhead from the thud of the gun in the distance. And like 3 bullets would pass before you would hear the thud of the first gun, first bullet from the chamber, just because of the distance he was from his targets. And that allowed us to get an accurate bullet count. And even doing that exercise of understanding the bullet count, we could tell at one point he was firing 90 plus rounds every burst, but at one stage he was firing 60 rounds. And that was the time when he first fired down the hallway at the engineer. So perhaps that, or the security man. So perhaps the security man distracted him.
Right.
You know, things like that. It just gave us a whole other level of context about what happened and who responded and where they were.
One of the pieces for doing work like this is, you talked about all of the videos that you were able to get. Now, some of those were shot by people who were there at the concert. Talk to me about how you approach people to get their footage in these kinds of scenarios, because there's a lot of times, especially in breaking news, where somebody has video or a photo that's really newsworthy, and you look in their replies to their tweet or what have you, and it's just all news organizations saying, "Can we have this? Can we have this? Can we have this?" You've been in those scenarios a lot. So for this one and in general, what kind of advice or direction would you give?
Yeah, I mean, first piece of advice is, don't hound people like that. Particularly if it's in a stressful situation like a mass shooting or, any event like that, and particularly be mindful of minors, approaching minors. For us, my first stop to gather videos was Storyful. We work with Storyful here still, and AP and the wire services. And that was the first round of evidence that we got. And then I cast the net out wider and started looking across other platforms, myself, to find things that, maybe Storyful didn't think that it was visually compelling or newsworthy, but there was evidence for me that was quite useful in it. And if I couldn't get in touch with the person myself, usually I'll try to establish a relationship or connect with them so that we can message privately, DM or Instagram messages or Facebook messages, or find their phone numbers or email address and contact them. And I did that with several of the people who were able to send me, the raw files directly from their phones, and those files contain metadata that is stripped out by the platforms, by the social media platforms. So the exact hour, minute, and second that piece of footage started rolling, and so that also helped with the timeline and calculating, when things happened.
Yeah, I mean that's an important point that I make in some of the materials for folks this week, that you have to try and get that camera original, whether it's a video or a photo, as much as possible, because once it's uploaded, the metadata is gone. But for establishing that timeline, once you could find the people and get them to send it to you, then I guess the EXIF data or what have you is there, and you're able to really see, if it's a photo, what was going on. I guess for video, is it the idea of when they uploaded the video, it gave you a sense of the timeline of when they had shot it?
Actually, I think most of the videos, the raw videos that were sent to me had metadata in them, and I used InVid, which is a great extension that has all sorts of tools built into it. Mm-hmm. And I just uploaded it there, and that gave me when the person pressed record for that piece of video.
Right.
And so by using the fingerprint of the bullet, or the burst of fire, I was able to plot it on my timeline and say, oh, well, they started filming here at 10:05.21. And by doing that with like 5 different videos, I was able to, they all went back to the same 3-second window of the event starting. So it's just valuable evidence.
So for people...
And people as well, just one other thing.
Yeah.
In contacting those people, I was explaining what I was trying to do with it. I think there was a lot of dissatisfaction with how the event was covered by the media, but I was explaining that I was, explaining what we were trying to do, and people were very helpful.
Yeah. So for folks who are kind of getting started in this area, getting started of trying to gather and verify information, Are there things that you would just recommend if they keep in mind as kind of starting points?
Yeah, put yourself in the uploader's shoes is one thing that I always say to people. They may feel that their social circle knows that they're in, I don't know, Tehran or wherever, so they may not tag a post as Tehran, but they may tag it as whatever the local slang for police is, or that square that they're in, or that kind of thing. So just think about how people might tag content. You know, um, use geo search, but use combine geo searches with keyword searches. Um, you know, uh, I would say as well, kind of whatever your area of interest is, start curating Twitter lists and engaging with that community and understanding who the reliable sources are, and who the best sources are of information for whatever that beat is. Yeah, I mean, they're the main things. Uh, Also, if it's breaking news that your beat is, look for the earliest mentions of that particular event, because they're your eyewitnesses. They're the people who are closest to the story and the people that you want to talk to. I mean, these are sort of the basics of social journalism, or any journalism really, but yeah, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to chat, and I'm sure folks will be looking for the next projects that you guys are putting out.
Okay, great. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.